Welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. Today, I've got a special guest. I do say that every week, but I do have a lot of special guests. But Josh Smith, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Josh, I know what you do, but maybe our listeners don't. So, can you tell everybody a little bit who you are, what you do for like your daily job?
Yeah, I'm the president of Montana Knife Company. Founded Montana Knife Company. I was a custom knife maker for years, starting from a little kid, and then I went from that career after about 10 years of full time. And then in my 30s, I went and became a lineman for the power company. Kind of went after the corporate job, paid vacation benefits thing, and all the while had the idea of this company. So I started this actually in COVID year of 2020. Started making prototypes in 2019, and then really got serious about it in 2020. So hasn't been very long, but we've kind of blown up. So it's been pretty exciting. And it's funny you asked me like what I do for my daily job, and I always think to myself, well, I don't have a job anymore. I quit my job.
Right.
This when you do something you love, it doesn't seem like a job.
Well, Montana Knife Company was interesting because I hadn't heard of it, and then it felt like it had been around forever. Instantly, it's like you went from I didn't know of you to it's like you guys have been around forever.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that way. I have a lot of people say that, and it even seems to me like we've been around longer than we have, just because I've been around forever. I started making knives when I was 11, and I'm 41. So I've been around a long time. I've hunted my whole life. I talked about Montana Knife Company to my friends, and the idea of it, I registered the name Montana Knife Company when I was 19. But I didn't launch it until I was 39. So it's kind of, I guess, technically have been around forever, but no one knew about it, So it was living in my head.
Well, it's funny you say that. I've got getting ready for this podcast. I've got a 10-year-old daughter. My wife and I were talking to her, whatever. And I was explaining, I was having you on, and that you had been making knives since you were about her age, because I had seen a video or something. And that was very interesting to her, because it's like, wait, he was 11 and he was making knives. So like, how'd you get into doing something like that?
Yeah, my Little League baseball coach started teaching me. He was actually an outfitter. And he would make knives kind of on the side part-time, and he'd bring his hunting knives to practice and show the dads, and I'm growing up in a small town in Montana. So, most guys in those towns hunt and like knives and stuff like that. So of course, being an 11-year-old boy, I thought they were awesome. So, my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas that year. And then, he invited me up to his shop that, probably about this time or so, maybe January, right after that Christmas, and I made a knife. So, I made a couple up there, 2 or 3 probably. And then I think it was probably his way of getting rid of me. He told me, if you want to be a knife maker, you got to have your own shop. So I started buying tools and equipment and started building my own shop, when I was 12. So.
And the rest is history, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a lawn mowing business. I'd make money for that. And then my folks owned an excavation business, so I worked in that. They were super supportive. My dad didn't make knives or hunt, actually. We pretty much just worked. But I was super fortunate. I had, Rick teaching me to make knives. And then there was a couple other guys in our town that I don't know why all these guys took a liking to me, but they offered to take me hunting. So I kind of grew up learning how to hunt from just a couple random guys in town that were super good guys that would take me up in the mountains and show me how to elk hunt or deer hunt and stuff like that. So it was kind of cool looking back on it. As a kid, I just took it for granted. It just was normal. Now that I've got kids that age and older, it's definitely not normal. It's cool that they did that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. We're going to take a few seconds here to thank a few sponsors. that help to make this show possible.
We are big fans of having glass with you when you're in the woods. So whether we're turkey hunting, bear hunting, deer hunting, whatever we're doing, we're bringing some sort of glass. Actually, one of the new fun pieces of glass that we've added to our collection were the UHD 18 by 56s.
Big boys.
I like them because then you don't need to bring a full spotter, and you can still do pretty well.
Yeah.
I like the 2 eyes. So we love Vortex. We use a lot of their optics on our rifles, on our chest when we're out.
Rangefinders, they got
rangefinders, amazing. So we'll love them. Go check them out. And actually, if you're going to buy some, check out Midway USA and use the promo code TFC10 for 10% off your order. I promise you won't be disappointed. Go check them out, Vortex Optics.
HuntWise is an awesome app. There's a lot of them out there. This one's definitely our favorite. They're local here in Grand Rapids, have their headquarters here. They have an awesome HuntCast 2.0 that's going to give you weather prediction, wind prediction, anything based off the pin and property that you're hunting to give you the best day to get out there and hunt. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Go get this app, huntwise.com.
It's no secret we've been shooting method arrows for a long time. Well, it might be because they used to be called vector arrows. Their method arrows now are super tough, great shooting arrows, great weight. And what's really cool about them is you enter your bow specs in, weight, draw length, all that stuff, and they will send
no more charts.
No more.
Let them deal with it.
The smart dudes who we've had on our show in the past figure it out for you, send you ready to go arrows,
ready to shoot.
Go check them out. Method Archery. We've shot a lot of bows, but for the past 5 or so years, we've been shooting prime bows. Love the way they shoot, super stable. And what we're really excited about, great warranty. And this year they rolled out the RevX series, which is pretty sweet. We've been talking about the different RevXs we're going to be shooting.
And you're going in the 6Y?
I'm deciding to shoot the 36, which is a
the only reason he's choosing the 36
is because I figure the bigger the bow, the bigger the buck. So we're going to test that out. Follow us this year to see if that actually happens. But that's what I'm shooting. You're shooting the RevX 4. Yep. So anyways, we love Prime. Michigan company. Great guys. Go check them out. G5prime.com. We put a lot of miles on whether we're hunting.
Boots.
Yeah, on our boots. Whether it's Alaska out west, even here in Michigan.
Let's just say the muck boots were left in the truck.
Yes. So we need something that's comfortable, that'll keep us dry, that's durable, and actually we like a little stiffer soled when we're hunting from our platform when we're saddle hunting. So we wear Lathrop & Son boots. I've been wearing the Mountain Hunter Encompass, and yours is the
Mountain Hunter Elite.
Great boots. Great guys from down in Illinois, the Lathrop brothers. Had them on an episode in the past. Go check it out. Go check out their boots, Lathrop & Sons.
If you didn't already know that James and I are saddle hunters, then you do now. And if you don't like it, then go listen to somebody else because we're going to talk about saddles. We wear Trophy Line tree saddles because we think they're awesome. And they come out with some awesome new products all the time. They just came out with a new Venatic saddle that is seriously the best saddle I've ever sat in. And I've sat in quite a bit of them. They also have the new Onyx platform out.
I spent some time on it this fall.
I've spent some time on it. It's pretty sweet. And they're going to continue to come out with sweet products just like those two. So stay tuned to them. They've got social media, trophyline.com. And save yourself 10%. TFC 10.
It's no use having an awesome bow if you don't have great accessories. So sights, stabilizers, things like that. And so that's why we chose to work with Redline Bow Accessories. And so those guys are coming out with amazing new things, whether it be new stabilizers or sights like this. If you're watching on our YouTube or video podcast, this new torch sight. So we're huge fans of this sight. Double pin. You know what? Go check out our past episode with them or check out their website. There's a ton to like about this site. Their stabilizers are great, and actually some of their quivers are incredible.
Yes.
So go check them out. Listen to the last episode we did with them. Oh, and save yourself 10% with the code TFC10. Yeah,
we talk about this a lot. You look back on certain people that definitely took time and poured into you in your life, and that makes a huge difference. And looking at it now, I mean, I get it. Like if I had, I've got an 11-year-old nephew and he likes to hunt. So anytime he's willing to go, I'm willing to take him for whatever reason. It's exciting to me. But so you've been making knives for a long time. I would imagine you've made all sorts of shapes and sizes. I think I saw on your website some like fancy knives and like,
Yeah.
You ever made a sword?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I made a I made a couple swords. That's a whole nother long story, but I made a couple swords for a sheikh in Abu Dhabi. He actually flew me to London to look at a museum or a sword in a museum over there, the Wallace collection. And then I built that. He flew me to Istanbul, Turkey, and then he also flew me to the United Arab Emirates to deliver it. So
he flew you around to see different types of swords that he liked.
Yeah, he was really into the historical swords from his region, from that Arab region. And, he really loved my work, but he wanted his, more historically correct, swords that applied to his region. He didn't care about a Bowie knife. He didn't care who Jim Bowie was. He wanted a knife or a sword that was originally, from that Arab region, that Persian region. So yeah, he flew me to the Wallace collection to show me a sword in particular. We got a private room in the museum, got the white gloves, and I got to measure it and do all these things and handle it in a private room. It was really a cool experience.
Interesting.
Sorry about that. I got a frog in my throat.
No worries. So that's wild. So how did this guy, you said a sheik? Of course it was a sheik.
Yeah. He contacted me through, he had a guy that was working for him, and the guy sent me an email, and this was really pre-social media. Facebook was just becoming a thing, but he sent me an email saying, my friend would like you to build him a sword, and he sent a picture of the sword, and I wrote back and said, yeah, I don't make swords. I'm not a sword maker. And, here's a couple names of a couple guys like Vince Evans, who is famous for making swords. I said, here's his phone number, call him. Well, he kept pestering me, and I wrote back again and said, even if I was to make that sword, it'd be very costly. That's a very fancy sword, very in depth. And he just kept saying, well, my friend would like you to do it. And again, there's kind of a long story here, but what ended up happening is he talked me into making him some steel samples. And again, I didn't know who I was working for. And about 7 days before I was supposed to ship the samples, they asked if I could just come to London. And so they bought me a first-class ticket to London. Man, bought me a first-class ticket to London. And, so the night before I left, finally I asked this guy, I'm like, who am I coming to meet? Because this is kind of getting ridiculous. And so then he told me, and the guy was super nice. He was probably about 35, 36 years old. Spoke perfect English, and a very, very nice guy. So yeah, I met him at the Capitol Hotel in London, and him and his bodyguards took me to the Wallace collection, and it was kind of a really wild experience. But and then he flew me to Istanbul, Turkey, to look at another sword. But there was a changeover in government that year. Turkey had changed government, and United Arab Emirates didn't have their connections set up yet. And so a representative of theirs from the consulate picked me up, and I had an armed guard drive me around in an armed Mercedes for like 4 days. And we went to the Topkapi Palace there in Istanbul. And I never did get to actually put my hands on the sword. They were trying to set up for me to be able to view it in a private room. And I ended up flying home, never having got to hold it. I got to see it through the glass like a tourist. And Sheikh Hamad was pissed about that, because they just didn't have their connections set up. But then he flew my ex-wife and I to Abu Dhabi, and we were his guest in Abu Dhabi for a week. Did a big hunting show there. His brother's president of the country. His dad started the country, but his brother put on a huge hunting show, and I was kind of a guest of honor at that. And it was wild because it was very similar to the size of like an SCI show.
Yeah.
Or a Western Hunt Expo, all around hunting. And this was actually back in probably 2007, like height of the Iraq War. And, I was worried about our safety and this and that, which actually, as I found out, Abu Dhabi and Dubai were incredible, super safe, really cool place to go. But this hunting show was interesting because here, all of our hunting shows revolve around how do you stay warm? How do you stay dry? camo, stuff like that. Everything at their hunting show was, how do you keep your, like, the sand out of your shit? And
Oh,
how
sure.
how do you keep water cool? It was all based around, mostly around falconry. So
Oh,
they
right.
had thousands of falcons displayed. Every booth was selling falcons. And these sheikhs would walk up to a booth and they would point at a falcon and they'd get a falcon out and they'd let it go and it would fly around that room. And then it would come back to them. And these guys were buying falcons for their falconry. It was really a cool show,
I
honestly.
wonder if that's like the Mongolian influence coming from the east, or how that came in. We've had one falconer on. He catches his every year and then lets him go.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was falconry over there is huge. And between that and then there was definitely a lot of, like sheep and goat hunters, but from the Afghanistan region and all that stuff. But it was a really cool experience. Honestly, I kind of wish I was older when I went. I was in my early 20s and I don't think I soaked it in really like I would today, but it was all just kind of surreal.
At what point, because like I feel like my thought would be, is this real? Like somebody's messaging, when is somebody going to pop out and like it's a joke? Like at what point did you actually, like, did you think it wasn't like a trick or anything like that?
All the way until I got on the plane, because they didn't even send me my plane ticket in a regular way. They had the plane ticket waiting for me at the airport. And when I got to the airport, the guy at the ticket counter was like, "Yeah, dude, you're supposed to bring your ticket to the airport." And I was like, "Well, I know, but they say there's a ticket here." And we had to do some like checking around. And he's like, "Oh yeah, here it is. Oh yeah, it's first class British Airways all the way to London." And I was like, "Well, this must be real because somebody bought me a freaking first class plane ticket."
Yeah. Yes.
I actually sat in the Capitol Hotel lobby. I was supposed to meet him at 1 PM, and I sat there till about 4:30, and nobody was showing up. And I was thinking, man, if I'm being punked right now, like that first class plane ticket costs them a lot of money to do it. Like I'm kind of okay with it. They flew me to
Somebody's
London.
committed. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
And finally the guy walked in, and Hussein was his guy that kind of had been communicating with. Super nice guy, white guy. Hussein, he comes in, he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He's like, His Highness was meeting with the Chinese, and the Chinese meetings always go long. And he's like, all His Highness wants to do is go talk about swords. He's like, "So let's go." And I was like, "All right." And I was like, this is really strange.
That's hilarious. So that you made
So now I'm making hunting knives. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
You just a winding road that gets you where you are. That's so cool. I figured, I don't know why that came to mind when I was kind of thinking about this podcast. I'm like, I need to ask him about swords. Cause I remember as a kid, it was like, if I could make a sword, if I'm like a 12-year-old or whatever, I could have an actual sword, king of the neighborhood instantly.
Well, you think about, back in the old days, you watch all these movies like Braveheart or whatever, and there's, 8-year-olds running around with wooden swords. And then by the time you're 13, you've got an actual sword. And I think deep down in our DNA, that's why we all, like, if you just hand two little boys a stick,
yeah,
they're gonna go to sword fighting with that thing, guaranteed. I think every little boy when they were 13 or 12 would have wanted a sword for sure.
Oh yeah, and you always get a sharp in the end for poking.
Yeah, for sure. Make it as dangerous as possible.
That's right. That was my whole life growing up. That was the coolest thing. That was the epitome of my technology back in the day.
I think that's what a lot of little boys are missing these days is that ability to just go outside and play and sword fight with each other and stab each other. And
well, I would get in trouble because we kind of did that, or I would steer it away from it. And so I was given these wiffle ball bats. And so I did a lot of epic sword fights, even with wiffle ball bats and my brothers. I would get the big red one and they'd have the skinny yellow kinds. So you could just, smoke them with that.
Yeah.
So, I explained at the beginning of kind of prior to this, we're in this hunting stories series. And so, with that in mind, let's move into it. Like I said,
prior to the show, this series is about, great hunting stories. It's one of the things we're most interested here at the fair at the Fair Chase. Just one of our favorite things about hunting and kind of talking about hunting is to hear about the incredible things that people just get themselves into when they go into the woods. And so, as you can imagine, we've had people on telling stories from all over the country, all types of animals, all great stories. So, Josh, when I ask you what comes to mind when you think of a great hunting story you've been a part of, what comes to mind?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was telling somebody the other day, I'm not like the most accomplished hunter, but I've gotten to do a few cool hunts. When I was 19, as soon as I graduated high school, before I graduated, I'd put money down on a moose hunt in Canada. So I went up to Alberta and did a moose hunt. I think I was actually 20 because I remember being quite nervous. It was about a week after 9/11 that I crossed the border, up into Canada with a rifle. And I was kind of worried or nervous that we would even be able to get across the border with everything that was happening with 9/11. So I did a moose hunt that year. That was cool. This past year I got to go to Spain and did a fallow deer and a red stag. And, I shot probably my best hunt that I did, personally was a mule deer down in Arizona, over the counter spot and stock. And I shot that mule deer behind me on the wall with my bow. And that was a tough one because I'd stalked him I went for about 1.5 miles, and down there you can use radios and your guides can walk you in. And, but about halfway to him, I was probably a half mile away from him. They got up and they fed. And then when they rebedded, the guide couldn't see him. So I ended up sneaking in, stalking in, and actually found him and ended up shooting him about 30 minutes later after I stood frozen for a while. But I say all that to say I've had some hunts myself that have been cool. But nothing can compare to taking my kids hunting and when my kids get something. I mean, I just don't, I could shoot a brown bear with my bow from 10 feet and I still don't think I would think that's more cool than when my kids shoot something. So, I've got a few of them, but honestly, a couple of them, it's really stick out. My oldest daughter, who's now 18, I took her on her first elk hunt when she turned 12, opening morning. It was pouring rain, just this, little girl. She'd shot a couple does when she was, I think a year before. But we parked the truck, we started hiking in, and it was weird for rifle season. There were still some bulls that were kind of late bugling. Mm-hmm. And so from the darkness, and it was pouring rain, it was soaking wet. You could hear these bulls bugling in the darkness the whole way hiking in. And I set her up on a fence post. These elk were down in this kind of alfalfa field, probably a mile from us, maybe not quite a mile, half a mile. And I set her up on this kind of fence post corner where I told her if she stood right in the corner of these braces, that little girl, she'd blend right into them, and I said, just stand there still. And I told her I was going to sit back in some bushes that were about 10 yards behind her. And so she's just standing there in the dark with it raining on her. And I told her, I said, these elk are going to go for timber. And if we get lucky, they're going to come to our timber, And I mean, like it was written out of a book, like a movie script. It was probably 10 minutes after shooting light. Here come two bulls, just come kind of jogging over the hill. And then they just stop and turn broadside at, 85, 90 yards. And I'm waiting for her to shoot. And of course, I'm 10 yards from her. I can't move, can't do nothing. I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And I thought she's frozen up, And then finally, all of a sudden I hear click. And I had realized she had her safety on. She was trying to shoot and she had her safety.
Oh, classic. Yeah.
She clicks her safety off and she ends up shooting one of those bulls. And it was super cool. She shot, bull spun and ran about probably 40 yards and stopped. And by that time I'm telling her to hit him again. And she shot him again and dropped him right there. And that was a really cool one. Along the same vein, last year, I took my boy to New Mexico, and a really nice guy had been following our company. He's a guide on a piece of private property in New Mexico. And he's like, I'm not calling to offer you a hunt. He's like, I'm offering your kids a hunt.
Cool.
And so we got to go down there, and my boy, he's a little savage hunter, loves to hunt. And he had been, I've been taking him elk hunting, but public land elk hunting with a bow in Montana is hard for an adult, much less a kid. And, Hank's 14. So, we chased some bulls around for a few days, and, all of a sudden, they were bugling back and forth, but they just weren't coming in. It was right on the brink of things cutting loose. And all of a sudden in one evening there, this bull just came screaming in. He was screaming his face off. And, my boy's a big kid. He's like 6'2". And
really,
I was trying to video, and the whole time I've got my cell phone. I'm also trying to cow call for him to stop that bull if I need to. And I'm trying to range find. So I ended up with my cell phone pointed right at his back. I got none of it on film, but you could hear it. You could hear the bull screaming, and it was kind of cool because as this bull came in, there was a huge bush on our left. We were kind of hiding behind, and I couldn't see the elk. And all of a sudden I see Hank draw, and all I could see was a cow. And I thought he was drawing on this cow, but Hank had seen that there was a bull pushing him. And as soon as that bull stepped into that spot where that cow was, Hank shot him with his bow.
Good instincts to be prepared for that. It's good stuff.
Yeah, he did a good job. So yeah, those stories, my little 12-year-old girl, Macy, she had never really shown any interest in going hunting with us. And a couple of years ago, she came to me in midsummer, and I've asked her to go with us several times, never forced her or pushed her. And all of a sudden she came to me and was like, can I go deer hunting this year? I was like, absolutely. And so I have 4 kids. So my other 3 kids and I made it a point that the first deer of the year was all about getting Macy a deer. So that was cool. So yeah, I shot a cow elk with my boy when he was 5. He was with me with my bow. That was really cool. And honestly, this is a hunt that I was not on myself. Last year, my 14-year-old boy got himself out of bed. I was still in bed, and he took his bow and went for a hike to the river down in the dark. Left early in the morning. He hiked down to the river, and he was down there for 2 or 3 hours. And all of a sudden I get a phone call, and he's whispering, and he's like, Dad. I was like, yeah. And he goes, can I shoot a bear? And I was like,
way.
I was like, yeah, if it doesn't have cubs. I said, how far away is it? And he goes, 10 yards.
What?
Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, hold on. And he puts his phone down on speaker, and I hear whack with his bow. And he shot this bear at 10 yards and killed her.
No way.
Yeah. Super, super old bear. She wasn't going to make it through the winter. It was pretty cool. It was kind of meant to be.
Yeah.
She was missing most of her teeth, and it was cool. But, so that's a bunch of rambling, but honestly, it's not really one hunting story. It's just kind of a culmination of taking my 3 girls and my boy hunting over the last 6 or 7 years. And it's all kind of totaled up to being really honestly better than any hunting story I could tell of my own,
No, I totally agree. I take my daughter out a bit. And so I had the same thing last year. She's 10. So last year she can do the youth season here in Michigan for whitetail deer. So I took her out, and I thought she didn't want to shoot a rifle, or where I'm at, you can only do you can't do different rifles. So she's like, I don't want to do any firearm. I want to do a crossbow. It's like, shoot, okay. So I got my dad's crossbow. I don't have one. It's heavy, right? And she can hardly lift it up. So we go out to the woods. I'm like, I brought a little kind of like a shooting stick that I thought might work. I'm like, I don't really know how this is going to go. So we get out there, I find a log. I'm like, all right, you lay, we're going to brush it on the ground, and we'll just see what happens. And sure enough, we saw 10 deer, of course. And we had a fairly nice buck coming in. that she would have been able to shoot, but the crossbow was too heavy. So as it's coming around, she's facing this way, waiting for it to just kind of come. And I'm like, don't move. And of course she's like, okay. And then she kind of turns, and right then it flies, it takes off. But I remember thinking my hands were, I was shaking. And I feel like she's looking at me to be like, Dad, like, you do this all the time. You shouldn't be that nervous. But when she's the one that's shooting, I was way more nervous. Way more.
True. Yeah. Yeah. And especially when they're little, I remember my kids, they'd be able to handle it now, but when they're first getting into it, your biggest concern is to not ruin them, and to not, you don't want to see them wound a deer and have the thing squealing, or, something terrible that, we've all kind of seen, we've all seen how it can go wrong out in the field. And, you want those first few experiences when they're little, because they're so impressionable. You want it to go really well, the first year, my daughter Sadie, she thinks about it now and she tells the story and she laughs, but it was all a blur for her. But her first deer that she ever shot, doe, she spined it, and the thing like drops and then like pushes up on its front legs, and it starts to kind of do the death squeal, and the whole, as soon as it drops, I was like, good job. And I grabbed the gun from her and I racked it, and I just shot that deer again. As like, I swear it was like John Wayne fast, and my other daughter and I are just telling Sadie how great she did and everything. And it was just like all completely a blur to her. And then, a few years later, it was like, yeah, you definitely did hit that deer real well. But of course she went home telling everybody like, oh, I shot this deer and it dropped and it was all perfect,
Yeah, right. Little behind the scenes stuff going on right there.
Yeah. But it's interesting. My kids, and this is kind of for all dads out there, now that I've got kids that are, 18 and 16, and they're getting towards the end of like at least being in high school. My kids are super accomplished with sports. They're all in AAU basketball, and they're all in every damn sport they can be in all the time. And over the last 15 years, 10 years, we've spent a ton of time in a gym playing whatever sport it was of the season. And I've asked all my kids this now. I said, what's your favorite game you've ever played? Like, because they've all won championships. They've all kind of had their hero moments. And I said, tell me about like the game that you remember. And not one of them can actually choose a game. They'd be like, oh, I don't know. I like basketball, or I like this or that. But none of them can remember a single game that they personally played that sticks out to them. Now, if I go in the house right now and I took any of them in there and I pointed to any little basket rack buck on the wall, or asked them about a doe when they were 10, if I ask them about any hunt they've ever been on, they can tell you where we parked our camper. They can tell you what day of the hunt it was, what the weather was like, where we were, how everything went down. I mean, every hunt that they've ever been on, they can tell you every detail.
Yeah.
And I think as a hunter, that kind of tells us a story and shows us just how impactful hunting is, and how special it is. Because my kids now have been on a lot of just public land deer hunts, frankly, and quite a few elk hunts. And they even remember one of the things I did most with them when they were really little is I took them out, and basically all we did was take a hike and start a fire.
Yeah.
And for them to go make a mountain house meal or a peak refuel meal and have a little campfire and start a stump on fire was like the coolest thing in the world. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
I'm pretty sure the only reason they wanted to go hunting was for us to go start a fire.
Yeah.
So I definitely, people with kids like your age, your daughter's age and stuff, like, man, get them out there. Cause I remember us, at times not going hunting or doing something because they had like a little football game or baseball or soccer or whatever it was. And last year for my boys elk was the first year I ever like made him miss sports for it, which he was all for it, but he's the kind of the star of his football team. And I was like, dude, you're going to be gone for a week, like middle of football season. It is what it is. It's the rut.
Yeah.
And now you ask him, like, what he was just asking me last night. He's like, I know I'm going to be a freshman and he'll probably start varsity. But I was like, dude, second week of September, we're going hunting for a week. And Hank was like, didn't even argue it. He's like, sounds good, you know. So
I love that. Well, and it's so important now because at least even when I was growing up, there was still some of that where you were kind of pushed and encouraged that way. Go outside, like, you know, lock the doors, send the kids outside for the day till it gets dark or whatever. It's just not the case anymore. You know, the world that my daughter, my 10-year-old's growing up in is that same push is not there. The encouragement is not to do those things as much as other things, more inside things. And yeah, she's a girl and maybe it's different, or I don't know. But I don't want that. You know, I want her to be outside as much as possible, getting as dirty as possible in, you know, whatever swamp, river, whatever is nearby.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fortunate. We have behind our property here, there's a public fishing access behind us. So there's 500 acres behind us. That's just a bunch of aspen trees and cottonwoods, frankly. And for the last number of years, one of my boys' favorite things to do is just, I have a machete that he takes and they just go down into the woods. And honestly, it's funny. One year he asked me to come back there and show me, well, actually my girls and him, they all said, come back and look at our fort we built. And I went back there and they had built a teepee, but they had chopped down probably 30 aspen trees that were all about an inch in diameter, inch and a half in diameter. And they literally had blisters on their hands. And it looked like a family of about 100 beavers had gone through and chewed down trees 2 feet off the ground, right? Like right at the perfect chopping height.
Yeah.
And they had built like a legit little teepee out of it. And they had like boughs over it and everything. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff like, yeah, they could cut themselves, they could do something, but honestly, that's what I grew up doing, building tree forts and out riding around. And it's how I got my first set of stitches, falling off my bike, carrying a 2-man saw, you know? So I agree. I think letting your kids just go out and have fun out in the woods and be a little bit mischievous, even though they're not doing a thing wrong. It's it's great for them.
Yeah, they get that sense of freedom. And I remember as a kid, I'd make forts. And like one time I discovered that deer had been like, I made like a lean-to and that deer would go in there and bed down in my fort. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And I just really remember as a kid, we had, so I'm in Michigan, kind of swampy where we were. And my brother and I always ended up in the swamp. I don't know why, we just love to go into the swamp. So my mom was like, this is, you know, we're up at the cabin. This is your last clean set of clothes. Like whatever you do, don't go in the swamp. And I just remember it was like I blacked out. I came to, I had lost a boot in the swamp. So I was one boot and I was just from head to toe. And that was like almost every time I went there, you know, for some reason, I'm just in a swamp covered in mosquitoes.
Yeah. No, if I'd have had a swamp growing up, I'd have been in the swamp 100%.
Yeah, just whatever's there. No, that's so cool. It's so important. And it's so cool to see that. I mean, you know, there are a lot of kids that spend a lot of time on video games, but there are also kids that are out there hacking, you know, woods apart with machetes and getting muddy and all the rest. So it's good to see that you're doing that too. Yeah,
I know there's great kids that, you know, that play video games and turn out great. I understand that, but like we never allowed our kids to have any video games at all. That we've never had them. And one, you know, if you came to visit us, you'd see our kids will sit around in the evening and talk with the adults. Like we have a basement with a TV down there, and they're never in the basement. They're always upstairs with the adults. They're always sitting there at the table, listening to the stories or whatever, telling stories and very engaged, you know. And, you know, I always tell my kids, we talk a ton when we're out hunting, and I know everybody talks about the kill and the animal and all that, but when we're out hunting, I'm constantly talking to them about, like, for example, where I take them deer hunting usually is over in the Missouri River Breaks. And it's where Lewis and Clark came through. It's crazy rugged country. It's beautiful. It's basically country that you don't go to unless you're going to hunt. There's no other reason to go there. There's nothing there. And I tell them, like, there's hundreds of thousands of people around this country that would die to go mule deer hunting the Missouri River breaks in Montana
Right.
for one time. And I'm like, you guys get to just come out and do this, and I don't think they'll ever fully have the appreciation until they're well into their adult years. But I always tell them, like, look at all these people, the way they grow up in these different cities around the world. And we get to just drive a few hours from our house and set up a camper in the Missouri River breaks and deer hunt. And we talk a ton about, taking care of the ranchers' lands we go on, if it's like a block management area, and talk about the deer and why we pass up certain bucks, to let them grow. And it's just, or why maybe like when we go over there, we don't shoot mule deer does because mule deer are having a tough time.
Yeah.
We raise beef. We have my kids have 4-H animals. So they
Okay.
have 4-H steers. My little girl raises a 4-H pig each year. So we butcher our own beef and pigs. And so we don't really need the meat as much. So like, it's different if that's what you need to eat, then shoot a mule deer doe. But like
Sure.
for us, if we go hunt for a week and we don't shoot anything because we don't find the right animal, that's all good. It's
Part
about
of it.
preserving them for next year. Yeah. So there's a lot of lessons about that navigation, making my kids, like, hey, where's the truck? Walk us back to the truck. And, so I think there's just so many lessons that come from hunting that very few kids really get that opportunity these days,
Oh, just even figuring problem solving, I mean, just learning from how adults are and how they do and be, that's huge. And you're right. That is a lot of people would kill to go, hunt the Missouri breaks once in their life, let alone all the time. That's really cool.
Right.
Well, we're coming up on time here. Like I said, thank you for coming on. But for people who want to follow along, I know you guys kind of do an interesting way of releasing knives. Do you want to talk about that and where people can follow and get themselves one too?
So we've bootstrapped this company from the beginning and not taken outside investment or money, or I didn't want to take a bunch of debt and put my family at risk. So, we kind of just started making as many knives as I could afford to make. And then we sold those. And then when I could afford to make more, we made more. And so we kind of stumbled on the drop method as far as just those were the amount of knives we had and we sold them. And, we've been very fortunate to have this company kind of take off. And so over the last couple of years, we've ramped those numbers up more and more. And we have drops where we, every Thursday night, however many knives we've made of a certain model, we put those up for sale. Now, where this did change just a little bit in the last week is we finally got to the point where we have our Blackfoot model in stock all the time.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people thought that we're like trying to be sold out all the time or didn't want to have knives available. Trust me, like if you want to buy a knife for your brother, I want there to be a knife available on our website. So we finally got to that point. So you can go onto our website, our montanaknifecompany.com and get a Blackfoot. Our other models, we plan on getting in stock at some point, but we still do our drop method. So every Thursday night at, 9:00 Eastern time, we'll have a new drop. And so, we'll make however many knives it is, and we'll put them up for sale. So that's kind of how you get them right now.
It's exciting that way. I'll say it's like the consumer side. It's always like, oh, what's coming up next? It's a good way to drive demand. And like, it is exciting. It gets me excited too. So very cool.
It's been a happy accident. I mean, it's definitely driven a lot of demand and it's driven a lot of excitement and talk about our brand. And, but honestly, it's all been completely organic and it's just been driven by individual people hopping on there and buying knives, which I could not appreciate more. It's been really cool. So.
Yeah, no, that's so where can people kind of find these drops and follow along for this?
Yeah. So our website, montanaknifecompany.com. Follow along on our Instagram, just at Montana Knife Company. My personal Instagram's Josh Smith Knives. You're going to get a little bit more of a backside feel of like, of the company, the kind of the back end, and also, just my family and more personal. The MKC is a little bit more of the business oriented posts and stuff. I encourage people to sign up for our email list on our website, because that's really the best way to know, get an email about what's coming that week. Maybe what show we're going to be at, or, I just restarted my podcast, the Josh Smith Show. So if you're on our email list, you're going to find out about all that.
Excellent. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. Like, everybody check it out. Their knives are awesome. We've definitely got some here in Michigan with us, and we're going to be taking them to Alaska here pretty soon, and turkey hunting and deer hunting and all the other stuff we get ourselves into. So love it. Thank you again, Josh, for coming on. Really appreciate your time, and everybody go check them out.